Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner. For those of you new to this channel, I know there's thousands of new subscribers over the last few weeks, and I really appreciate that. Thank you. I want to introduce myself briefly. I'm a constitutional attorney. I'm a member of the United States Supreme Court Bar. I'm a best-selling author of several books, including books on the Second Amendment, and I'm proud to say that my scholarship was cited by a federal judge in 2021 in declaring the so-called California assault weapon ban to be unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. And if you love the Second Amendment and want to protect it, please hit the subscribe button now and help us with the YouTube algorithm and support this channel. Now, I've got a question for you for today, and it should not be too tough to answer. What is the largest army or potential army in the world that nobody ever talks about? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? It's the gun owners living in the United States. That's right, American gun owners, as a group, may very well be the largest potential army in the world today. Details to follow. Now, you might think that the largest army in the world belongs to one of the global superpowers, such as the United States military, the People's Liberation Army of China, or the armed forces of the Russian Federation. Now, it's true, for example, that China's army is quite large, boasting maybe 2.2 million active military personnel, quite big. The United States military has about 1.4 million active personnel, and Russia's military has maybe 1 million active personnel, depending on what's going on, of course, in Ukraine right now. Yet, it is not correct to say that any of those is the largest army in the world, in my view. You see, in reality, I think you could argue that the largest army, or really a potential army, if you will, in the world consists of American gun owners. Yes, I understand this is an army of gun owners that's mostly on the sideline right now. We're not training every day. We have no formal generals or operational leadership or anything like that. But that doesn't mean that we should underestimate the critical importance of this large army of armed Americans as a force for good here all across the United States, okay? And of course, if Ukraine had such an armed citizenry before the invasion by Russia, maybe the situation there would be much different. In fact, my view is that if Ukraine had a robust armed citizenry and a Second Amendment like we have here in the United States, including a robust gun culture, it's not clear to me that Russia would have taken the chance and invaded the country in the first place, which would have been the best case scenario. You don't want to win a war, you'd rather avoid it. That is always the best case scenario. The second best case scenario is to win a war. The first best case scenario is to avoid the war in the first place, okay? Now, of course, though it's impossible to know the exact figures, I think it's fair to say that experts estimate that there's approximately 80 million American gun owners right now. And roughly 5 million of those individuals became first-time gun owners in the year 2020. And in 2021, another 5.4 million Americans became new gun owners as well. This is all according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation's analysis of the NICS background check data, which, as you know, is published by the FBI. Now, an equally impressive figure in my view is the number of privately owned guns in circulation, which is estimated right now to be over 400 million. And of course, we don't really know the number of millions of guns in circulation in the United States because there's no way to know. There's no registry, and we don't want there to be registry because registries are bad, okay? Registries of gun owners, bad. Registry of guns, bad, okay? And they don't exist for all intents and purposes, okay? Now, you heard this right. There are more guns with 400 million plus guns in the United States in private hands. I'm not counting the military. I'm talking about private guns, okay? There are more guns in circulation in the United States than our nation's total population. And more than 40% of the population here in the United States report that they live in a home that has at least one gun. Now, these raw numbers mean that the world's largest standing army is less than 3% of the total number of U.S. gun owners today. The comparison, as I see it, is even starker when you start to consider how many individuals are in a standing army that actually probably don't bear arms, right? I mean, militaries are full of other people, administrators, technicians, engineers, people that drive trucks, all of which are very important, of course, for operating the military, but they're not directly involved in handling weapons, for example. Now, our folks, of course, the gun owners in the United States, we actually have guns, right? And I suspect, frankly, our founding fathers are looking down on us from heaven, smiling at the fact that we have so many arms in the United States and such a robust armed citizenry. That was what the founders wanted, and I think we've accomplished that goal so far. So although American gun owners today as a group might be characterized more accurately as a dormant army, don't kid yourself. American gun owners are gun owners by choice, and this is very important because these folks have chosen to exercise their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And depending on where they live, they might have been required to take classes, they might be required to fill out paperwork, be fingerprinted, wait in lines, pay fees, whatnot. They may even have been harassed by neighbors, coworkers, or family members online. We don't know. But they are undeterred, right? And I bet it's probably safe to say that the majority of these folks also know how to use guns because they hunt, target shoot for sport, they train for self-defense purposes if need be, maybe they have military experience, maybe they have law enforcement experience, but one way or the other they've completed firearms training, or simply they grew up using firearms like many Americans. Now this is a very important fact because as American history teaches us, one of the reasons that the early Americans were able to defeat the British in the 18th century during our American Revolution was because the early Americans knew how to shoot guns, okay? Firearms were part of their lived experience, their everyday experience, okay? They used guns not just for self-defense against other humans, but also to protect themselves and their family against dangerous animals. And I'll put a link down below to all the different ways and reasons that the founding fathers in that generation used guns for social utility and good reasons, okay? Now, the founders and the people that lived at the time also used their firearms to hunt, to protect livestock from wolves, other predators, and they often killed animals for bounty or to eat, okay? They also loved shooting competitions. That was very popular back in the founding era. And in other words, I think the bottom line is this, that our founding generation that created the Second Amendment and the entire Constitution and the whole country for that matter, they didn't just own guns. They knew how to use these guns to great and socially positive effect. So if a crisis, now today, let's bring it back today, just like back then. If a crisis arose, a national crisis arose, or a foreign invader came knocking at our country's door, I suspect that our American army of 80 million gun owners would be in a position to that of the early Americans who fought off the British, okay? Certainly we would be better prepared to spring into action than Ukraine citizens were prepared to do just recently. I mean, how many of you saw the national media coverage of Ukrainians being trained to use firearms with wooden guns? Seriously, wooden guns. How does that help? It's not a gun. It's a piece of wood that looks like a gun. It's not a gun. I mean, crazy, right? To me, again, as we talked about Ukraine in other contexts, to me, this is just too little too late. We'll see what happens with the war, but they certainly could have been a lot more prepared than they were when the Russians invaded. Now, some people have said in response to my Ukraine videos that there's no reason to own a firearm until and unless your country is invaded. Of course, that's like saying there's no reason to learn how to cook until the last restaurant in the country shuts its doors, or perhaps there's no reason to buy a fire extinguisher until your house is on fire. That's not logical. That's not how you think. You want to get your gun. You want to learn how to use a gun. You want to be prepared to use a gun before you need to use the gun. No different than any other form of preparation to protect your lives and the lives of your family and your neighbors. In my recent videos about Ukraine and the Russian invasion of that country, I talk about one of the critical lessons that Americans could learn from that, which is that by having a robust gun culture and armed citizenry, which we have in the United States, that deters bad people from doing bad things to us, including foreign invaders or tyrannical people that might arise here to do bad things to Americans internally. Okay? Many people say that's absurd, but I want you to stop and think about this, why it's not absurd. You see, many countries hostile to American values would love to invade our country. Come on, let's face it, the United States is super rich. We have a wealth of natural resources, from oil, we've got natural gas, we've got clean water, we've got minerals, productive farmland, powerful rivers that stretch, we have a country that stretches from sea to shining sea. And of course, we have great wealth in terms of infrastructure, housing, technology, industries, highways, architecture, art, and the list goes on and on and on. So the motive and incentive clearly exists for foreign invaders to try to come in, invade this country, take over the country, and take our stuff, among other things, okay? But it hasn't happened. And it's not, again, it's not a matter of luck, okay? What it is that because the United States is so well situated and prepared for foreign invaders, we've been able to deter foreign invasions. It's not luck, it's not random, it's actually preparation, and it's a feature of our entire American system. Now, our homeland has not been invaded in a real way, and I want to set aside some narrow specific examples that some of you have made astutely so in the comments down below, but the reality is I think we haven't been invaded in part because, of course, the strength of our military, and I would suggest as well on account of the size of our civilian gun-owning population. I mean, as the apocryphal quote, supposedly from Admiral Yamamoto teaches, you cannot invade the mainland United States because there is a rifle behind every blade of grass. Again, that quote may not be historically true, but the sentiment and the concept certainly is true. What invader or tyrant would ever want to be in a position of having to take on 80 million American gun owners? You probably couldn't successfully invade the country, and even if you could, you couldn't hold the country as I see it, okay? You wouldn't be able to hold down the country, given the number of people with guns in America that could fight back. And if you don't believe me, I think you should take a look at our history books, by the way. The last time a foreign invader set foot on American soil in an attempt to take over the United States was in 1812, in my view. Okay, and I know there's some people in the comments take exception to this observation with some specific examples, such as Pearl Harbor, 9/11, the Japanese takeover, some of the Aleutian Islands in World War II. I think these are all good examples, but I think the reality is if you look at the U.S. homeland, and I would not count these examples really in a material way because the homeland has not been invaded in any kind of major or sustained invasion since, again, 1812, the War of 1812. So again, as I see it, we've had over 200 years since we last experienced as a country a major sustained invasion of our homeland. And again, this is not because nobody in the world wanted to take us over. There's plenty of people back historically and today that would like nothing more than to take out the United States and take all of our wealth and control this country, if they could, but they can't. Not just because of our great military and not just because of our wealth, but equally important as I see it is the fact that there's over 80 million proficient gun owners in this country that would be in a position to fight back if that scenario were to come true. Okay? Now, are you still not convinced with what I'm saying? Let me give you an illustration that may hit a little bit closer to home. Consider that in most rural areas, country areas, with widely separated houses, home invasions are really a very rare event. But think about why is this the case? I mean, given the isolation of these homes, spread out across, rural Vermont or Iowa, or Missouri, or Missouri, or Kansas, shouldn't these rural homes be easy pickings? I mean, these people are kind of out there by themselves with, 911 minutes, if not hours away in some instances. But you see, the answer is these homes are not easy targets at all. Because most people in these rural areas in the United States are armed. They're armed to the teeth. And not only that, they know how to use firearms. This makes home invasions and robberies a much more dangerous line of work than it is in cities where many Americans in places like New York City, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and the like are unable to protect themselves with firearms thanks to onerous and likely unconstitutional gun control laws. Of course, we will never know how many crimes and acts of terrorism law-abiding gun owners have deterred. Okay, but the effect we know has been very real, and a potential army of 80 million plus gun-owning Americans, which is 35 times larger than the next biggest army on earth today, is a pretty powerful deterrent to bad people who want to do horrible things in a huge way to us. How many of you remember the movie Red Dawn from the 1980s? And of course, there was another one, more recently. But I think the famous one is from the 1980s. I mean, people may imagine that movies like Red Dawn, which again was set in the middle of the 1980s, in the middle of the Cold War, and starred Patrick Swayze and Charlie Sheen, they think these things will be a fantasy, okay? But the common refrain, right? The common refrain is that this could never happen here in the United States. But this collapses, you see, when one takes a look at the news today. You best believe that the citizens of Ukraine fighting Russia right now wish they had a Second Amendment to protect their right to acquire arms and proficiency with them. Okay, we've talked about this in other videos. And of course, right now, looking at the Taiwanese, I'm thinking they may find themselves ultimately in worse shape if they have to fight China. Because Taiwan, they don't have Second Amendment rights either. that we here in the United States have worked so hard to protect for over 200 years. And always remember that the easiest way to strip someone of their rights is to get them to give them up willingly. And we should never let gun control advocates hack away at our Second Amendment protections and inflict death by 1,000 cuts, which is, I think, one of their strategies today. But the reality is this: in 18th century America, which is where our Second Amendment comes from, the year 1791, of course, you see, a militia could not exist without the individual right to keep and bear arms being a pre-existing right? Because militias back then were drawn from armed citizens who already had guns, who already had cartridges. They were already using the guns, and then they would show up and report for militia duty after the fact. But it presupposed that these people had their guns before they had to do anything in terms of protecting the country or joining a militia or do anything like that. And this has not changed today. And just as our founding fathers needed to resist a domestic tyrannical government in the form of the British back in their times, so too should we here in America as gun owners always be on the lookout for foreign and domestic threats to our rights, okay? Because that's our job, to be vigilant. And I think that's what the founding fathers expected us to do and would want us to do. Okay? So I hope you learned something today about the 80 million plus American gun owners and how they're really a dormant army waiting to be unleashed if and when, heaven forbid it doesn't happen, but if and when some emergency, national emergency or foreign invader were to come. But we are here, and hopefully by being here, we're able to deter bad people from doing bad things to good people and to our country. And I hope you enjoyed this episode and have learned something. And again, thanks again for watching us here at the Four Boxes Diner. We continue to strive to improve, and we'll hope to see you again here at the diner. And please, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so now. Thank you.
Orders up. Table 2A.